Good evening. Welcome to the yearly Christmas horror advent calendar, where those of us who like to dabble in the arcane arts read each other's stories once a year. My name's Andrew Freudenberg, and I've been asked to read A Twist in the Tale by Dane. London, England, 1874. A waterfall of soft Chinese silk in many shades of blue, green and silver flowed down Amara's naked skin as she disrobed. Alone in her dressing room, at the theatre, so cramped it was little more than a large wardrobe, she felt safe away from prying eyes. Even more important, away from the constant, lecherous gaze of her employer. A flickering candle and a cracked mirror with much of the silver backing missing was better than nothing as she began to apply her stage makeup. Amara had joined the Merry Minstrels variety show when they'd played a theatre in Huddersfield. She'd been a leading act in a small tenting circus touring the north of England, but hard times had forced it to close. Amara was grateful for the chance of employment in a touring theatre company. She had her own reasons not to risk settling in one area so far from London, a city so teeming it was easy to get lost in the smog-shrouded crowds. Already beautiful, in the mysterious manner the audience expected, Amara applied grease paint to accentuate her high, fine cheekbones, her long, slender neck. Her costume would hide her cleavage and back, covering the line of shimmering scales in iridescent colours that echoed that of her silk robe. In the fragile sanctuary of London, mixed-blood human demonic beings were meant to stay in the shadows, always despised and often hunted. Not lit by limelight and entertaining music hall audiences. Here in the provinces, they were not allowed to exist at all. Her quiet preparation was ruined by a brash hammering on the door, one of the stagehands giving her a 10-minute call. She thanked him and carried on getting ready. No need to rush. Her act was a new star attraction. They could wait. Despite the heavy snowfall, the packed audience in Farnley, yet another small industrial town, were not sophisticated people. So starved of colour and excitement in their drab, hard, toiling lives, the owner of the Merry Minstrels, the great Rolando, believed he could throw any rubbish act on the stage and they'd lap it up. Like his washed-up magician, Marvello, whose on-stage incompetence and wayward rabbits and doves still had great comedy value, or Fanny and her old arthritic dancing dogs. They still enjoyed them out in the provinces. Now Gentleman Jim's jolly japes had them rolling in the aisles with laughter. Anti-Irish jokes never pulled away from the Troops-based theatre in East London, which had a sizable proportion of immigrants from the Emerald Isle. Rolando ushered off the always inebriated Jim before the jokes turned from impish to obscene and angered the now happy audience. These working men had brought their wives and sweethearts to the show and could turn ugly if confronted with all uncalled-for lewdness. Such was the knife edge Rolando had to endure with his clapped-out performers and time-worn acts. That just left his latest acquisition, his new star performer, the glamorous, exotic dancer and contortionist, Princess Amara from Persia. He'd thought long and hard about taking her on the tour of northern cities. London was used to the bizarre and the eerie, a seething, polluted melting pot of human races, and in the darkest shadows, supernatural beings and their hybrids. What the people of London tolerated would not be accepted so far from the capital. In his favour, Rolando had always insisted on all his performers must be fully human, and had convinced himself that Amara was exactly that. He'd seen many live contortionists in his many years in the entertainment business from his youthful employment in travelling circuses. She was no different to them, but so much more exotically lovely. A mesmerising beauty, he never missed watching her performances from the wings. 5 months later, the great Rolando and his troupe of music hall entertainers had hit rock bottom. After the relative success of their shows at the Farnley Lyceum, the Merry Minstrels had moved on to Leeds in a well-appointed large theatre at the centre of the big city. The Gaiety was newly built, a large ostentatious building brimming with municipal pride and funded by the benevolence of its wealthy industrialist patrons, so much so that it outshone any his troops had performed at on tour or even in London. Its size and gilded magnificence overwhelmed Rolando's threadbare acts. Performance anxiety spread like a contagion. The rehearsals were a disaster. The master of revels seethed as acrobats fell down heavily, jugglers dropped batons, and Fanny was badly bitten by one of her dogs, one so ancient it was now deaf and blind on stage. Off stage, opera singer Consuelo was loudly weeping in her broad Cockney accent that she was losing what was left of her voice. Gentleman Jim had hit the bottle hard again and was completely comatose in the command dressing room. The final straw came as Firebrand let one of his blazing torches drop and started a small fire on the wooden stage. Calling all the merry minstrels on stage, Rolando gave them a vicious tongue-lashing. "What a load of bloody useless, washed-out has-beens, all of you," except the lovely Amira, of course. "This show is bleeding important. This could be our comeback, but you're all going to bugger it up for me. I hate you all." No one answered. The enthusiasm for their art had long gone. They carried on for a roof over their heads and food. No one had been paid more than a pittance for years. Ronaldo had even conned some of the troupe into being heavily in debt to him, one they could never hope to pay off. "You're all sacked. Pack your bags and bugger off. I can get new entertainers." Shocked at Ronaldo's cruelty, Amara helped the others gather their belongings as a plan formed in her mind. The boss of the Merry Minstrels was well overdue a visit from fate. He'd fled with his entertainers from the troupe's London base under a shadow, amid whispered rumours of foul deeds and the unknown fate of Lily, a missing young dancer. Amara knew that fate after Consuelo mentioned seeing the girl's ghost on stage during performances. Both women, now friends, were convinced Ronaldo had killed her after she spurned his lecherous advances one night. Amara decided to give the bastard's destiny a hefty shove in the right direction. She went to the distraught Consuelo and whispered quietly, "Be patient, my lovely. Rolando needs to face what he did to Lily. You must all return together to the London base. At least you'll have a roof over your heads by staying at the theatre. Wait for me to come with good news." A fearful Consuelo had agreed. What other choice did she and the others have? Most were too old, too inept to find other employment. Before long, the big theatre was empty of performers other than Amara and an understandably nervous stage crew. They too had made mistakes during rehearsals. Flats tipping over onto the stage, smoke illusions set off at the wrong time, and a heavy canvas backdrop disastrously nearly fallen on Marvello the magician. Apparently, replacing performers was easier than experienced through elderly stagehands, and they'd escaped being thrown out of the Merry Minstrels. For now, at least. The show's musicians had also escaped Rolando's wrath, again to great relief. They too were getting on in years and needed employment. Their boss had no ear for music and had not noticed the odd dropped notes or missing musician after a heavy session in local taverns the night before. Rolando placed an advertisement in the city's main newspaper for acts and sent a telegram to his agent in London. There was still time, just, to put a show together. It wouldn't be hard to improve on the one he just got rid of. He was angry with himself for not doing it much earlier. Such a sentimental old fool to have kept those decrepit, washed-up acts for so long. Even with the possible continuing irritant of the company's resident ghost, he looked forward to starting over with a clean slate. Glowing with anticipation of a spectacular opening night, Rolando shook hands with the last of the successful auditions and rewarded himself with a large balloon of fine cognac. Being at the splendid new Gaiety had clearly attracted class acts, many all the way from London. Life had made a turn for the better for Rolando. He decided a fresh start needed a new name, and was now the master of the wonders of Amazonia. He knew a taste of the exotic was a crowd puller anywhere in the world. No more dancing old curs, pyromaniac jugglers and clumsy magicians, no more old fat women wailing boring arias no one could understand. The opening night was a sellout, and Rolando would give the audience exactly what they craved: excitement, intriguing sensation, and colourful spectacle. Nothing could spoil it, not even the silent grey shadow that continued to haunt him. He had hoped it would have gone with the others. No matter, it could not harm him. Opening night, and a delighted Rolando paced the wings, pausing every few moments to take a peek from behind the curtains. Gaiety was filling up fast, the audience animated and excited. He spotted many gentlemen in black silk top hats and glittering bejewelled ladies. At last, a wealthy audience. He no longer had to endure putting on shows for fans, for farm workers reeking of ordure and grimy with coal dust miners. If the show went even half as well as the last rehearsal, his fortunes would be totally reversed. All his lifelong dreams would at last come true. His new company was certainly dedicated, practicing long into the 3 frantic nights prior to the grand opening, even after the exhausted stagehands had sought their beds. Curtain up, revealing a sunny set purporting to be an exotic, colourful jungle glade. The painted canvas backdrop of ruined Inca temple as imagined by Henri de Vere, the new set designer, a.k.a. Harry Vernon. From the temple, garish plaster-stone gods and monstrous beasts gave the audience their best baleful stares, horrific enough to give the audience a harmless frisson of entertaining fear. The band played a suitably outlandish tune to add to the atmosphere. The entire cast arrived on stage, all wearing fearsome masks, their garb vaguely Amazonian with liberal use of vivid-coloured ostrich feathers. Those who could dance gyrated in the forefront of the stage. As the music rose in a crashing crescendo, the lighting was dimmed and the cast moved aside to allow a heavily cloaked figure to arrive, lit by a single shaft of limelight projected from a balcony. As the audience focused on the mysterious figure, the cast slipped away into the wings to prepare for their own acts. The music changed tempo to sinuous erotic chords, and the central figure began to sway in an openly feminine, sensuous rhythm. To gasp from the crowd, the black cloak was thrown back, revealing a slender young woman scandalously dressed in a gleaming, tight green outfit with a sequin pattern resembling serpentine scales that clung to her curves. In the wings, the great Rolando's eyes widened in a clashing blend of lust and horror. He'd never seen Amara perform in such revealing garb before, was unaware she even possessed such clothing. This was enough to ruin his reputation. He rushed behind stage, seeking out any act he could hastily throw on stage to replace Amara, but was halted in his tracks by loud cheers of appreciation coming from the audience. They loved her. Leo Tigre and his clever cats could wait. The contortionist was performing like never before. Rolando watched, awestruck, and with increasing confusion as she danced and climbed the fake jungle trees with a sinuous grace, her lithe body turning and twisting like no human should be able to physically do. At times, Rolando became confused. Was he watching Amara or some strange serpent on the stage? The glint of cold golden eyes, the swift flicker of a forked tongue, the illusion of long curved fangs, it was all too weird for the master of ceremonies. He was about to stride on stage to close the performance early when she finished to rapturous applause. And now he saw nothing more than a beautiful woman gifted with great flexibility. Aware of his own state of arousal, Rolando guided her off the stage and hastened on the next act before the women in the audience noticed any similar condition in their menfolk. Nothing like delightful domestic cats to distract them, he reasoned. No one could train cats to perform tricks, but Leo Tigre somehow had a magical way with them. The stage rippled with a purring river of tabby, black, sandy, and ginger forms, a dozen ordinary domestic moggies moving as one. Their antics were certain to impress and please the crowd as they obeyed their master, jumping through hoops, walking a tightrope, and intertwining in a complex cavalcade to music. While he waited in the wings, Rolando instinctively looked out for the sad shade that haunted his troupe. There was no sign of it. His loud, expressive sigh of relief startled those around him, breaking the rule of silence off stage during performance. He did not care. With the crowd so enthralled by the felines on stage, Rolando could have yelled out loud his relief at the absence of the ghost, and no one would have noticed. Jugglers, tumblers, and dancers followed, all with equal success. How could they not? Rolando had never seen acrobats able to balance so precariously or so high, or dancers leap and pause suspended in the air as if stopped mid-motion. Time for some humour. Rolando ushered on Mr. Aloysius Scrope, a stern-faced clown with his hapless sidekick Grub. Scrope was a tall, skeletal individual who towered over his diminutive victim. Both were dressed in torn and dirty black tailcoats and wore battered top hats. Grub's was too large and sat down too low over his face for comedic effect. Scrope's hat was too small and was perched at a precarious angle on his narrow, bald head. Playing toss down on their luck, it seemed Scrope blamed the gormless Grub for their misfortune. Using perfect timing and robust athleticism, the pair entertained the crowd with a wild, fast routine of knockabout slapstick and tumbles that had the crowd roaring in laughter. A comedy of cruelty, but Rolando knew what people wanted, as long as the malice was not directed at them. It ended as it should have, with Grub getting his own back on his tormentor. That's what the audience wanted and expected. The act had not veered from their rehearsals. Rolando's face creased into a rare smile of relief as he ushered them from the stage to enthusiastic applause. The final act before the grand finale was a magician, the miraculous Mage of Morocco. For once, Rolando did not doubt the man's origin. The mage was darkly foreign, with black imperious eyes that glowed with a curious power. There was nothing flamboyant about his garb, a simple North African jalebo in indigo blue cotton. Nor did he wear any headwear. His hair hung long and black down his back. If his simple appearance on the front of the stage with nothing but the main curtain as a background was disappointing to the crowd, his act was anything but. The limelights dimmed, leaving the stage in near total darkness, the audience losing sight of the magician. In the wings, Rolando's anxiety rose again. None of this was in rehearsals, when this act consisted of flights of brightly coloured dyed doves appearing from the jalebo's wide sleeves. Now the man raised his arms high, and a glittering gold dusk emerged from the sleeves, swirling around him in a whirlpool of its own strange light. The audience gasped in astonishment as the magical sound grew in size and appeared to have a life of its own. The mage conjured huge images from the mysterious substance, a camel, a row of pyramids, waving palm trees, all above him on the stage. As a grand flourish to end the act, sound came together again and formed a vast dragon that flew from the stage to hover and swoop over the audience. It was all too much for many. To Rolando's horror, frightened patrons bolted from the auditorium. He yelled at the stagehands to raise the lights immediately and ran on stage to calm people down. "Dear ladies, esteemed gentlemen, there's no need for alarm. This is nothing more than stage magic. Harmless smoke and mirrors. Please keep your seats for our spectacular grand finale. Prepare to be astounded." Many of the audience continued to leave the auditorium in a hurry. Frightening Dragon was more than enough excitement for one evening. That one act could have ruined the show. Rolando fought to contain his rage. Everything depended on staging an astounding finale. With his performers ready in the wings, the stage set, he prayed for miracle and no more nasty surprises. As the orchestra started up a reprise of the opening number, the main curtains drew back to reveal the Amazonian scene again, but in darkness. That was not right. It should have been daylight, gradually fading to night as the finale ended. Trying not to panic, there was nothing Rolando could do to stop the momentum. Flaring torches lit up the grotesque temple, making the gods and monsters seem alive in the flickering beams. The dancers ran on, now virtually naked, their bodies painted in garish primitive markings. "No, no, no, no!" A distraught Rolando whimpered in the wings. This alone could close down his company for public lewdness. He could even end up in jail. Why was this happening? Who was responsible for trying to ruin him? Next came Leo Tigra with his cats, only they were not the same moggies from earlier. Now they were full-size sleek panthers, lions and tigers, roaring instead of purring. Rolando heard shrieking in fright and the unmistakable sound of an auditorium emptying in a panic. Each act was coming on stage now. Fire Eater ablaze from head to toe in wild flames that were not harming him. Jugglers flinging up sharp swords and axes. The features of the two clowns had elongated and distorted into living masks of pure demonic malice. Music ended abruptly with a discordant clatter of dropped instruments as the orchestra fled. Rolando ran on stage. No audience remained. He was alone with his terrifying new cast. Silently, they surrounded him. A solid wall of living monsters, some eerily beautiful, some grotesque. This had to be that mongrel bitch Amara's doing. She'd set her mixed human-demon kind on him. He should never have hired her, treated her like a queen. She was no different from the other disloyal human parasites he'd hired and fired. Furtive whispers broke out in a sinister ripple through his captors, threats of what should be done with him. Whimpering with terror, Orlando made out some of the menacing talk. "Feed him to Leo's big cats. There's plenty of fat meat on that carcass. Go on, Loge. Light him up like a beacon. Rip him to shreds with your fangs, Amara, and make it slow." Scope, the tall clown, now a terrifying skeletal figure, his long face a chalk-white death mask, more skull than living features, stepped forwards. Behind him, his sidekick Grub skittered, uttering an insane giggle, a collection of sharp metal medical instruments clutched in his small, stubby hands. "Dearest Amara, you summoned us to help you dispose of this vile specimen of humanity." Scrope spoke with a surprising soft, educated voice, holding back his partner with a light touch of a long, bony hand on Grub's shoulder. "How about letting my companion have him? He's used up all his past toys. It would please him so much to have a new plaything." Rolando felt a scream build up within him, but terror had paralyzed all but his bodily functions, which did their best to escape his fate by immediately voiding him. The company of horrors shrunk back in disgust, revolted by the foul stench. Amara addressed the others. her human form still interwoven with the snake-like demonic heritage. Her smile revealed the needle-like curved fangs. Rolando's already fear-weakened limbs threatened to fail him completely. What was this monstrous, treacherous bitch going to do with him? My good friends, I cannot thank you enough for answering my summons, but there is one amongst us who should decide this wretch's fate, his innocent victim. A gap appeared in the gathering as they silently moved aside and allowed a grey, shadowy figure to pass and stand beside Amara. Through fear-clouded eyes, Rolando saw the smoke-like form become more solid, more distinct. A young woman in a spangled, torn tutu. Lily, of course it was, the young dancer whose body he'd craved to the point of drink-fueled madness, his lust and demands so scorned by her that he took her by force, while his strong, stubby fingers tightened around her slender throat. The harder he thrust into her elfin virgin body, the tighter his grip around her throat. She'd gone limp and still before his climax. The little bitch had denied him his triumph over her by dying. Now she stood before him, an ethereal, silver-glowing image that hid none of her past beauty, her stolen innocence. Maybe she'd be merciful. Somebody had to be first to have her. Why not her employer, who would have rewarded her well, would have lavished gifts and money and given her star billing? All she had to do was give in to the inevitable, even relax and enjoy it. He'd never had any complaints from past amorous adventures. It was her own fault she'd died, silly little tart. This is your revenge, child, murmured Amara, as Rolando was thrown forwards and forced to kneel in front of the spectre. We will abide by your decision. The dancer's lips moved, but her killer could not make out the words, yet the surrounding monstrous crowd certainly did, whispering to each other over his fate. Damn them all to hell, back to the infernal realms where they truly belonged. The mist-like form became more distinct, the swirling vapours solidifying. Trembling, Rolando saw her petite body and sweet features change as all her anger emerged from her lost soul. Her eyes became black pits of horrifying rage, her body tense and predatory. There'd be no mercy here. Whimpering, he begged for a swift and painless death. She spoke, her voice more frightening than her appearance, an echoing, hollowing sound, as if from a distant, dark realm. Eric Henry Jones, you will not escape my revenge with any mercy. I want you to live. Any scrape of hope soon evaporated as she appeared within inches of his face. He could smell corruption and the stench of the deep cesspit where he'd thrown her weighted body. You will no longer be able to strut this world with your pride and arrogance. Feel the weights that pulled my body down into the sewer now on your own limbs. Crawl amongst people like the vermin you truly are. Rolando dropped to a crooked stoop, every limb heavy and painful. She'd not finished. The sweet fragrance of my youth was stolen from me, replaced by foul decay and ordure. Your skin will exude this for the rest of your life. No perfume, no exotic unguent, no amount of bathing will ever remove it. People will shun you. Even those who pity your crippled body will be forced to turn away. You will be alone, Eric Henry Jones, shunned and despised. Rolando beseeched with the theatre company. I hired you, believed in your talent. I wanted to make you rich. There must be something you can do to stop this vindictive little bitch. The curse had been cast. Already his body reeked enough to make an elephant faint. The performers left, their plan fulfilled. Alone on the stage, Rolando had crumpled to the floor. He was alive, but his reputation was destroyed. The debacle of the Leeds opening night would leave him financially ruined. Jail awaited him, a blessing of sorts. At least he'd be housed and fed. But what after that? One by one, the limelights went out, leaving him in darkness. But even that held no comfort. He'd seen what lurked in the shadows, and they would always be there. Thank you, and good night.